Konnichiwa, Pakusei Tachi. I'm Puppy-Sensei, the puppy girl Japanese teacher VTuber that makes Japanese language content to help you level up your abilities. So students, I think there's one thing that's pretty universal to all people. A lot of people are shy, and a lot of people are outgoing, and sometimes I think it can be a little bit difficult to get people talking with one another. Because we're all different, and, you know, we all just maybe don't always vibe with one another. But I pretty firmly believe that one thing that we all have in common is that almost everyone really likes talking about the things that we enjoy. One of the things that I tend to do when I'm working with a new student is to better understand what it is that they like. I believe that learning should be as enjoyable as possible. So if I have a student who really likes anime, well, that helps me as a teacher because I know that I can teach that student anime terms, and they're going to retain that information because they're learning about things that they already enjoy. And the terms and grammar forms that we learn together are going to relate to things that they love. I had a student one time who just loved baseball. And so whenever possible, I would teach them baseball terms. I would use baseball metaphors in my lessons, and it worked because I'm doing what I need to do to meet students at the level where they find themselves the most engaged and interested. So I take it seriously when I say that today's topic, talking about things we enjoy doing, is one of the most important Japanese grammar points you can learn. So let's look at our grammar card. Here it is. Today we're going to be learning the no ga suki grammar pattern. Now, specifically this grammar pattern is one that we're going to use to discuss verbs that we enjoy doing. However, and I know this sounds a little counterintuitive, but technically what we're actually doing when we form sentences using the no ga suki grammar pattern is we're taking verbal forms and we're turning them into noun-like forms. We're making noun-like forms out of verbs and then expressing that we enjoy doing the noun form of that verb. This does allow us to form sentences like I like running, or I like baking, or I like teaching, which are the types of sentences that we're going to try to replicate in our example sentence today. Technically speaking, in English, these verb plus ing forms are considered gerunds. Gerund is a word that I'm pretty sure you probably learned in your basic English grammar class and then you promptly forgot about it and basically never thought about it again. But technically, what we're doing in this case is just nominalizing Japanese verbs. We're taking a verb form and we're converting it in such a way that we can use it as if it were a noun. We're basically turning a verb into a noun-like form of that verb, the doing of that verb. Now, one of the easier ways that we can accomplish making a verb into a noun-like form is simply by adding the particle no to the end of the dictionary form of that verb, which is what we're going to do with no ga suki today. All right, so this is kind of the process. Verb plus no. This makes the nominal form of this verb, the noun-like form. So as an example, taberu, which means to eat, plus no can be taberu no. To eat plus that noun modifying particle equals eating. ですね. We can do this in many instances to turn verbs into noun-like forms. Although there are some verbs that simply make less sense as noun forms and ultimately are sort of going to fall apart. But active verbs, however, can pretty much always be made into these noun-like forms using this same process. Other examples would include taberu plus no equals taberu no. We already talked about that one. That's eating. Hashiru plus no, hashiru no would be running. Benkyou suru plus no becomes benkyou suru no, the act of studying. Or bibiru plus no becomes bibiru no, the act of being nervous or startled. As you can see from these examples, forming the nominal form of these verbs is really pretty easy. We're just taking the very basic form of the verb, the dictionary form, that is the form that ends in an u sound, and then we're adding no. And so we can see from these examples that it's pretty easy and it's pretty consistent, right? Nothing is really changing too much. So fairly simple. There are two very important points that I'd like to call your attention to, however. First, don't get this noun modifying mid-sentence particle no confused with the sentence ending informal question marking particle, which is also pronounced no. They are different particles doing different things. When we use no in this way to form a noun-like usage for these verbs, we're often going to see this followed by a second particle, very often the ga particle, to talk about something being done to, or being done by, or for that noun-like verb form. This is what we'll be seeing today when we form sentences that talk about how you enjoy doing that particular verb. On the other hand, we also might have sentences like this one. Taberu no? Taberu no? With this rising intonation, we know that this sentence ending no particle can take the place of a ka in forming a question. So ordinarily you would think about ka being the question marking particle in Japanese, but we can informally use no in cases like this. Taberu no, in which case that is a whole sentence. It's a question, right? So while taberu no ga suki desu, taberu no ga suki desu means I like eating, taberu no by itself with this rising intonation means something more like have you eaten? Did you eat? The other thing that I want you to take note of is the fact that I keep saying that we're turning these verbs into noun-like forms. That's a little bit different from saying we are turning verbs into nouns. And the reason that I'm being quite careful with my terms here is that technically speaking, the conjugated nominal form of a verb in Japanese doesn't precisely equate to a noun in a one-for-one way. And as a result, the ultimate use of these nominal verb forms like taberu no isn't always in every situation going to behave exactly the same way that we would anticipate any other plain old noun form to behave. We're not going to spend too much time talking about that today, but I just don't want to lay improper groundwork by giving you the impression that verb plus no equals a plain old noun. And it's not really a one-for-one grammatical equation, right? These things don't exactly become a one-for-one same thing, right? And so I think we should be careful about that. We should define our terms very carefully and say that this verb plus no form creates something that is noun-like and behaves a lot like a noun. Okay, so we've done a whole lot of talking about how we use no to form these noun-like verb forms. So let's actually start forming some sentences using no ga suki, right? I like doing some verb. What you're going to see is that now that we've done the hard work, not very hard work, of just adding no to a basic dictionary verb form, really adding ga suki at the end is just as simple. It's really, really just as simple, right? And so we could have a sentence like this. Kaku no ga suki. Kaku no ga suki. I like writing. Literally, I like the act of writing. Something like that. This is pretty easy. But nevertheless, let's be really intentional and take the time to really understand what each individual aspect of the sentence fragment is actually doing by way of review. Okay, so moving left to right, we see the verb kaku. Kaku. Kaku means to write, right? Writing like with a pen or a pencil. Okay? So kaku means to write. We also know that that's the dictionary form of the verb because it ends in u. Okay? Kaku. Kaku. And very, very, very frequently, almost always, in most cases, when you have a verb ending in this u sound, that's just the dictionary form. That's the form of the verb that you would see in the dictionary. So it's the plain, non-conjugated form of the verb. Okay. Kaku is then followed by the noun modifying particle no, right? And we've already talked about that. We know that that particle is working to coerce the verb kaku into a noun-like form so that it can then take the particle ga, right? So we get kaku no ga. Ga is a particle that marks the subject of a sentence, but ga expects to follow some kind of noun-like form. It wants to follow a noun. Ga follows nouns and then identifies those nouns as the subject of the sentence, right? So whatever comes before ga is very often the subject of the sentence. As I've said plenty of times, Japanese has two particles that act in this way to identify the subject or the topic of the sentence. We have wa and we have ga. And much ink has been spilled over when you should use ga and when you should use wa. It's very complicated. However, we know that ga is always used with verbs of existence like aru and iru. So a ga arimasu sentence, a ga imasu sentence, those are always going to be ga, right? They will always use the ga particle. And ga, in that case, lets you know what it is that exists, okay? We also know that ga is always used with verbs like ski to identify things that you like or that you have a preference for. And that's precisely what we're seeing here. This feels a little bit like hitting a dead horse with an even more dead horse, but just for the sake of being entirely clear, let's compare how a sentence fragment like this looks with a more traditional noun, okay? So now we're comparing two sentence fragments with very similar structures. We see at the top, この本が好き. この本が好き. I like this book. この本, this book. Kono refers to things that are right there within your reach, or things that you can speak about in your direct area, right? So, kono hon means this book right here near me. And that's the noun part, right? So, kono hon is our noun. Ga identifies that noun as the subject of ski, meaning to like. I like this book. ですね. And kaku no ga suki functions exactly the same way. I like the noun form of to write. What is it that you ski? Kaku no. I like writing. Okay? One thing though. Have you noticed that I keep referring to these as sentence fragments and not as sentences? Well, technically, if we wanted to make this sentence fully grammatical, we need to add the copula to the end. Remember that the copula is often used to compare two things and create a degree of equalness between them. The copula, namely des in the polite form or da in the plain form for Japanese, equates two things. It says this thing and this thing are the same thing, right? And to that end, they function as the Japanese version of the English word is, right? And so once we add des or da to one of these sentences, we're kind of saying something more like writing is something that I like. I equate writing and things that I like as the same. All right, so let's add des to these sentences and we get この本が好きです. I like this book. この本が好きです. And we get 書くのが好きです. I like writing. I like the act of writing. I like doing writing. Writing is des, a thing that I like, right? And so what is des actually doing in this sentence? Well, it's saying that in the Venn diagram of things that exist in this world that are books and things that exist in this world that are things that I like, this book falls in both. Or in the Venn diagram of things that are actions like writing and things that I like, well, writing is one of those things that I like doing, right? So this book or writing and thing that I like are both things that describe the thing in question. You get it. In the field of semantics, we sometimes build syntax trees, like the one that I'm about to show you. This one really is a very, very, very simplified one, but nevertheless, I think it might be a helpful tool for our situation here, right? So this is a syntax tree, okay? Again, I think that this is quite simplified for a syntax tree. It's not a very complicated one, but what we're seeing here is one sentence broken up into a noun phrase, kaku no ga, and a verb phrase, suki desu. Right? The noun phrase is made up of a nominalized verb that is then marked as the subject of our sentence. And the verb phrase, if we can really call it a verb phrase, is made up of the noun-like adjective suki and the copula desu. Okay? I don't know if seeing the sentence written out like this actually helps you in any way at all, but from the perspective of giving you a really careful reading of what's happening in a no ga suki sentence, I thought that it might kind of give you a little bit of a different perspective. I don't know, I find it interesting, and maybe you do too. So if you want to talk more about syntax trees, I will always talk about syntax. I think it's very interesting. So really, where I would like to go from here for today is to ask you, dear viewer, to tell me about things that you like doing. Can you form some simple no ga suki sentences, right? It should be pretty easy because all you have to do is take a base verb and add no ga suki, right? Take any verb from the dictionary, write in the dictionary form, the u form, and then you're just gonna add no ga suki. Can you do that for me? Do you like swimming? Oyogu no ga suki desu ka? Do you like cooking? Ryori suru no ga suki desu ka? Do you like pickling little fishies? Kozakana o tsukeru no ga suki desu ka? What do you like doing? I would love it if you would try to write some very simple sentences in the comments for me. Just do your best. I won't judge you. I promise. I really, really hope that you can express yourself, and it'll make me very happy. So, onegai shimasu. それからまたは来週の文法の内容を習うのが好きですか? Well, then let's do that. Let's learn what we're going to study in terms of grammar for next week. So here's our wheel of grammar. Yeah. All right, so what's it going to be? What's it going to be? What is it going to be? What will come up? What will we get? Ga arimasu. Ga arimasu. Okay. All right, this is one of the most basic grammar patterns, so next week's grammar drop will be a little bit more basic, but that's a good thing. We actually already talked a little about ga arimasu today, but I think that we can do a deep dive next week and really, really talk about what's going on with ga arimasu. I'm always saying that I think it's really important to ensure a very firm foundation of the basics upon which to build. So, you know, review is a good thing. Review is good for all of us. So let's do some decent groundwork together next week. また来週